Eleanor, one of the challenges to the Judeo-Christian religions, indeed to all religions, is the question of universality versus particularism. So, do all religions have at their basic core the same truth, and that they're all in touch with the ultimate reality and expressed because of cultural differences, different doctrines, which superficially look like they're contradictory, but those are just sort of social constructs, and if you get down to it, they're really worshiping the same God? Or is there really a hardcore, radical particularism in that there are truth claims that are indeed contradictory, and religions do conflict? Because each religion, of course, superficially says it's the only true religion. As a Christian philosopher, how do you deal with this?
Well, for sure and certain, I'm a particularist. But you have to think, what is this particularity consistent? So go back to your original question. Do all religions worship the same God? Well, the thing to notice is that religions don't worship anything. People worship, not religions. So we can ask, do all religions give the same view of reality? Do they all have, basically, at bottom, the same truth claims? And there the answer is certainly not. I mean, certainly not. So Christianity thinks that Jesus is God incarnate, and Judaism denies it. I mean, you know, that's not the same claim at bottom.
Well, the argument is that there's a deeper bottom, that's not the bottom.
Yeah, but those claims are incompatible.
Those claims
are incompatible.
For sure.
Right. So I think a more interesting and more meaningful question is, do all people who worship the same God? That's a different question. And there, you want to distinguish, you want to make a couple of really crucial distinctions. In the first place, there's what a person worships, and then there's what a person thinks that person worships. These are not the same thing,
okay.
You know. So the British thought of themselves as Christian, and they assumed they were Christian. They believed they were Christian, and they brought opium into China with gunboats to the great destruction of that people, the great destruction of the country. And the Emperor of China, who did not identify himself as Christian for sure, said to the British, "Don't you people have any fear of heaven?" Well, I mean, what do you think the answer was? My thought would be, no, they don't. They certainly don't. They don't have any idea of heaven either. And they may think they're Christian, and I can't imagine who would agree with them, watching them in action. So how you identify yourself is one thing. What you're worshiping is something entirely different. So that's the first thing to see. And the second thing to see is that when we're talking about the ultimate foundation of all reality, the creator of all there is a fact of the matter. You know what I mean? There is a way, if there is a God, there is a way God is.
Yes.
And the way God is, on Christian doctrine, is perfectly good. If you love what is perfectly good and open yourself up to it, then it really doesn't matter very much what you call yourself. You are still worshiping that. Whereas if you call yourself a worshiper of what is perfectly good, and everyone can see about you that what you find of ultimate value is something very different from perfect goodness, then you're not worshiping that. So what Christ says is this. He says, I am the way. No one comes to the Father except by me. And that's fairly particularist.
Very particular.
Very particularist. But notice that he doesn't say, truths about me are the way, and no one comes to the Father except by truths about me. That's not what he says, see? And there's a huge difference between knowing a person and knowing facts about a person. So one time, I was giving a talk at Wheaton, and in the audience was the daughter of my next-door neighbor. And she came up to me after my lecture very excited and said, "Who knew? Who knew? I thought you were just Monica's mom." So if you'd asked her, do you know any lecture-giving philosophy professors, she would have said, no, I don't know what you're talking about. But when she saw me, she knew me. See what I mean? And that's the point. So you may identify, as C.S. Lewis said, as a Tash worshiper and find out that you've got very funny names for Aslan. That's his way of putting this point. The issue is, what's your connection to the thing which is, in fact, perfect goodness that actually is able to call you by name? Do you love it or do you not? And if you do, you belong to its group. And there is only one way, to salvation, and that is to love that which God is. But it isn't the way, that way isn't a matter of theological truths. You can have the theological truths totally mixed up, completely mixed up. You can suppose you belong to any bizarre group you care to associate yourself with, but if what you really love is that, and if you love it under its name as Christ, or you love it under its character as beauty, it doesn't matter what name you love it under. What matters is whether you love it.
So people can be can participate in the process, that whether you call it salvation or what, and not even know that Jesus is this way.
I think that's completely true. That's a radical
position, though.
Yeah,
isn't
but that's an implication of Jesus saying, "I am the way."
Yes.
If a person is the way, you can be related to that person without being possessed of a lot of facts about that person.
Is that
or any facts about that person.
That's not traditional Christian doctrine.
Well, you know, in my view, it is.
Well, if you say it is, I'll accept that.
Well, you know, Aquinas asked this question. He says, could pagans be saved? And he says, well, would your pagans believe that there is a God and that he rewards those who seek him? I guess that would be enough. And Rahner famously thought there were anonymous Christians. And here's my last story on the score, which I love. This comes from an insufficiently accurate memory of a book by an anthropologist. This is a book by an anthropologist about pygmies. And as I remember this book, so if I've got the story about the anthropologist all wrong, the story will still make the point. So in the story as I remember it, the anthropologist belongs to an academic tribe that sees the main sin to be avoided as the sin of altering anything about the people you're studying. Mustn't alter them at all. But this anthropologist gets himself in trouble and needs some help from the local pygmies, so he pulls one pygmy out of the tribe, takes him way far out of his normal location, hopes against hope that the pygmy doesn't get altered in any way by what happens, and then the worst happens. They bump into a Catholic priest, Father so-and-so, who doesn't know anything about the mortal sin of anthropologists, and shamelessly evangelizes the pygmy. Now, according to the anthropologists, the pygmies have a religion of their own, very simple. They believe there's a God of the forest, he loves them, they're his people, and he takes care of them. So the anthropologist, watching the Catholic priest evangelize the pygmy, starts to sweat blood, and finally he can't stand it anymore, and he says to the pygmy, "What'd you think? What'd you think about what Father so-and-so said?" The pygmy says, "Well, I don't know. Seems to me like the God he was talking about is the God of the forest." And now you have the point. Whether that story's true or not, now you have the point. The pygmy, hearing the story of Christianity, says, sounds like the God I know. And then what are you going to say? I mean, the particularist line of Christ is, "I am the way." The pygmy claims to know him, but not to know anything about Christianity. And therefore the pygmy knows him, and he is the way, not the theology. Like that. So it's a particularism which is, you might say, highly pluralistic.